Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the AM Inspiration Theatre. We're here this afternoon with sponsors Salesforce, who've been supporting us throughout the day with sponsorship of the insight delivered on this stage. This is really the opportunity of Matthew Simpkins, Senior Director from Salesforce, to tell you all about the work that they're doing in the sector and also help you gain a little bit more of an understanding on how retailers can take back control of their business, particularly through the use of customer data. Salesforce now very much making a targeted approach into the automotive sector with a range of suites which have been demonstrated over on their stand behind you now. So I guess there will be some insight on those products from Matt, but suffice to say, they do allow you to bring together your retail business and control that customer journey and have that sight of the customer journey that will allow you to retain customers and, crucially, maintain that relationship, which is always at risk of interlopers from outside the sector, new entities that are starting to enter into the digital space and compete with the traditional retailers, and also OEMs, of course, who we're seeing take an increasing command of the customer journey. But without further ado, you're not here to listen to me, so Matthew Simpkins, take over. Thank you very much.
Good. So yeah, appreciate you making the time in the afternoon. It's great to see such a good turnout, I think, today, and kind of get the industry back together and back on its feet and looking forward. So I want to talk a little bit about giving back power back to the retailer, and for me, this is all about how we use the data. For those of you who don't know, Matthew Simpkins, I'm Senior Director for Automotive here at Salesforce. I've spent 10 years in the industry in a number of global market and retail roles. And it's interesting because we come here today and there's a lot of stands and a lot of suppliers and there's a lot of technology in the automotive space. But I think one thing that we recognize here at Salesforce is that it's about the people and it's about the process and it's about the data. The technology is an enabler, but how you implement that technology, how you change your organization to really harness the capability is what really matters. So with that, I want to talk across four kind of key themes today. The first is, how do you actually promote data? If we all admit it, sometimes we don't understand it. It's not really seen as super attractive, but it's really, really important. It is the fuel that runs your business. How do we democratize the data? Because inherently, we tend to keep data in silos. We're protective of it. There's often financial implications behind the data. There's PII, there's GDPR. Everything tells us to stay away from it. But actually, we need to try and democratize it and use it at scale. How do we unify the data and bring it together? This is becoming increasingly difficult with a proliferation of systems, of channels, of touch points with the customer. And then finally, I want to touch on how you as a retailer can utilize the data to unlock new revenue streams. So some interesting stats. You've all seen a lot of stats here today, but this is based on some Salesforce research that we've done around the connected customer. The challenge is that while a lot of people say that actually the experience that an organization provides is as important, if not more important than the product, the challenge with the data is that a lot of customers don't trust how companies are actually using their data, and 54% of them actually say they don't get a value from it. And I don't think we do a good enough job of actually explaining the value exchange of customers giving us our data or using the information, not just at the point of transaction, further on in the interaction life cycle with the customer to really, really drive value. And this is an ongoing challenge. And it's not just really the retailer perspective. We haven't made it easy for ourselves because actually we complain about double key in the data, right? This is something that we hear. The source is open conversations with you as retailers. I don't know a single retailer who doesn't complain about having to double key data into systems. And this is often the cause because things aren't integrated. You've got different tools implemented by different departments, and we don't have a common set of standards yet, really, in the industry. And I think one thing that I would like as a bit of a call to action is that as OEMs, as retailers, as suppliers, we should be looking to drive a common set of data standards, right, that will lower the cost of doing business within the automotive industry. We're already starting to see signs of this with TSAX in Germany. So this is a new compliance framework around the use of data and the control of data. And with Tesla looking to potentially bring FSD into the marketplace by 2026, and the increase in autonomous and connected vehicles, I think the level of compliance around data, not just for the customer, but for the vehicle and the life cycle, will increase, and we need to get into the front seat on that. The other stat here is that actually, we've run a lot of sessions in the last 12 months about the cookieless future. You will have seen the announcements from Google and others around what can you do, and the need for first-party data now is more important than ever before. And anecdotally, probably less than about 50% of the top retailers at the minute have a logged-in area on their website, have a logged-in state where a consumer can identify themselves and you can collect valuable first-party data that you can use throughout their life cycle with you. But that said, there are tools and there is the capability out there to gather a lot of information about the customer's digital browsing activity even before they disclose some of that PII. And that means that you can start to personalize the websites, you can start to generate next best action, you can make them feel like they're known and they're understood by your brand before they actually get to the form of putting in their details. And I think it's important to really say that as you put in some of this capability, you've got to really think about the end-to-end process of that capability. So let me give you a good example. A lot of retailers in the last 12 months have put in e-sign capability, things like DocuSign, to not only improve the digital experience of capturing customers' details, but to do it in a more secure way. But then there's been examples where, and I've gone through the process myself, the sales executive will then print out that digital form with all of the confidential information in it, put it in an envelope and send it to the customer through the post. It's not a great experience. And if that wasn't bad enough, there's been examples where you've gone into a showroom and the form has been printed off from the website for you to complete, and it's got the I am not a robot reCAPTCHA box there on the piece of paper for you to kind of tick. And it's little things like that which raise a smile in the room here. But it drives, first impressions count, right? And the way that you use the data and the importance of building trust with that data is really important. So, a little bit around data volumes. We've had a couple of conversations in the forum today about the volume of data, not just, if you're Facebook, all of that digital data and browsing data that's coming in place, but I want to talk a little bit about the data that's coming from the car. And I think the OEMs have demonstrated that it's not enough to just collect all of this data, right? It's what are you actually going to do with it? What is the value proposition and the value exchange that you can bring to the customer? And there are a number of partners out there, but Salesforce partner Automotive have kind of identified this space, and they're busy signing contracts with OEMs, retailers, fleet companies, and leasing companies to say, actually, look, we can collect that connected vehicle data, we can cleanse it, we can orchestrate it, and we can play it back to you so that you can use those signals for meaningful interaction throughout the life cycle. This isn't just about knowing about mileage or average trip distance or history or proactive vehicle data. It's about actually driving meaningful communication with the customer. And when you survey customers and you say, are you happy for some of this data to be used? If it is around safety, if it is around convenience, if it is around a lower cost of ownership, then customers will subscribe to having this data being used. And as a retailer, you can be in the front position of doing this. We've seen good examples, again, of retailers creating a really effective digital acquisition strategy. So moving away from the vehicle data for a minute, but allowing them to profile customers that are browsing on their site and are in social media, and to drive a much more targeted acquisition strategy. Other examples of retailers that are trying to work really closely with their OEM partners to exchange the data with the OEMs. Why? Because actually, the OEM wants you to communicate with the same voice, the same tone, the same right message at the same right time. And that only works if you're exchanging data that allows the OEM to understand where is the customer in the life cycle and vice versa. And then I think the final point is that the wider automotive ecosystem needs to democratize the data. And with the current headwinds and challenges, I think a number of suppliers have been pushed to open up what were previously locked systems, because data has to move out of the individual silos, and more ultimately needs to be done in that space. So I'll pivot a little bit to the data journey. Each of us have our own terms in terms of what are the stages of the journey that customers go through. But I think the really important thing here is that in each of these stages, you can start to collect more and more data around what is the customer actually doing, what is their browsing behavior, what are their affinities, what are our interests. But quite often this data stays locked into the silos, or at the point of purchase, the data kind of gets archived in the lead management system, and it never makes it through to after sales, or through to finance, or through to repurchase. And really, the point I'm trying to make here is that you've got to have that unified view of all of that data that the customer's collected with you over time. You've got to democratize it so the after-sales department can see that kind of customer intent, and you can use things like upsell indicators and cross-sell indicators to drive more revenue. Again, a great example of this is customer satisfaction data. Boy, do we love a good survey in the automotive industry, right? But why aren't we automating some of that information so that if a customer gives you 10 out of 10, it automatically triggers an upsell, offer for merchandise, for accessories, for added parts. If it's negative, why doesn't it trigger an automated learner journey for the sales executive or the service rep so they can improve the experience the next time round? It's joining up and creating closed loop experiences, both for the customer and for the employee, that really sets the difference. And then when we talk about the renewal stage, how often do you get a communication out as a customer saying, are you in market to buy, or are you ready for service, that is just completely ill-timed and not really relevant to where you are or your purchasing capability? So bringing that data back through from the explore stage back into the renew stage is really important. And I think the final point is if the data isn't unified, right, then all of these kind of cutting-edge AI and machine learning capability that you've maybe heard from Anita at Facebook and others, you can't use artificial intelligence to drive next best action, to drive propensity modeling, churn analytics, or just even basic personalization on your website if it isn't all brought into one place. And finally, you can't start to create really good and effective dashboards, right? Everyone talks about bringing the data together. One of the key reasons why we do this is to improve visualization and to improve forward-looking decision, right? So actually, it's not just what are my KPIs, what are my performance indicators for this. It's about allowing every employee to take proactive, insight-driven action that really makes a difference to your business and to your margin. And you can look at it within one area, such as sales, such as marketing, but you can also start to bring together these dashboards. So you can look at everything across core performance, across CSI, across lease, across service. Bring this data together with really impactful numbers, with data that you trust to drive your business forward. So I've only got 5 more minutes, so I'm going to just pivot to kind of the final key message today, which is what is the future opportunity for automotive retailers? And I think as the OEMs move into the agency model, and McKinsey expects probably 60% of OEMs in Europe to move into the agency space by 2030. And you saw the presentation, some of you earlier from Boston Consulting, around the challenges that EVs bring in terms of kind of revenue and service. Retailers, for me, need to diversify their revenue streams. But the great news is there is a lot of opportunity to do this. Okay? The rise in the agency model has also coincided, and you saw it before, in the explosion of e-bikes, e-scooters, and other mobility trends. And off the back of COP26, consumers are looking about a more sustainable way of mobility and moving about. And I think really simple opportunity. A lot of OEMs already have branded partnerships with leading bike manufacturers. Is to start to explore opportunities to be a bike agent, because these products are expensive. Okay, the average e-bike now is going for between £3,000 to £5,000 to £6,000. A high-performance road bike is £10,000 to £12,000. There is opportunity and brand equity to be built from here. The second is around brand experience centres. We've talked about different retail formats, especially in capital cities and big urban areas. The OEMs are going to be investing more money into these brand experience centres. It's an opportunity for you to increase your value to the OEM about creating a destination that customers want to come to be part of that brand experience and to really understand and connect. It also supports the business hub model, which kind of leads me on to that third point. My best example, my favourite example of this is Archibald and Shorter, their Green Lane showroom in Auckland in New Zealand. They built this absolutely fantastic statement site, but they built it with the intent of having it as a business meeting hub, of having daytime and evening entertainment, and really opening it up to the community to drive more intimate engagements and to really make it a site to go to. The final 2 points are definitely evolving. The ROI model probably isn't quite there today. But again, as we start to look at the changing dynamic of home and office working, actually, how could you potentially influence, if you're an urban retailer, that last mile commute into the city for work or into the city for pleasure? Can you offer secure premium vehicle charging and parking? Can you provide a face to exchange for e-scooters, e-bikes, potentially collection and rental? It's these slightly divergent, slightly adjacent industries and opportunities that you could start to move into. And I think the final pillar, which is starting to definitely emerge in a number of European cities, is where European retailers are starting to partner on that last mile commute and the last mile side of logistics. You've seen the explosion in home delivery. You saw the announcement in the press that Currys have partnered with Uber to deliver electrical goods to people's homes or into offices. And actually, if you've got the right kind of real estate and you've got the right partnership network, you can provide short-term storage, collection, and delivery of goods. It's a completely separate and new model, but the right kind of partnership opportunity. You look at the margin that is being made by logistic companies at the minute with the challenges around supply chain. The research that we've done and the partnering that we're doing with some of the strategic firms shows that this is a really interesting place to start to lean into. So just in closing, how do you as retailers become data-driven? As I've said, raise the profile of data within the organization. Make sure every employee understands the value of that data and how it is used down the journey with the customer. Set clear KPIs for data quality, for data accuracy, and because ultimately what is measured gets done. And good retail practice really comes around bringing everyone around to make sure that they take accountability for the data quality. And it's not just something that's keyed into a system and it's forgotten about. I think the second point is around democratizing the data. And this can be done in a number of ways, right? Bringing all the data together in a common analytical tool. So you've got a reporting suite that sits across marketing, sales, service, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction. Okay, or having an underlying system of engagement that provides that common thread. But basically get the data out of its locked-in silos and bring it together so that every part of the organization can use that data and can be more informed about the performance of the business. And then thirdly, bring the data together, unify it so you can make that forward-looking decision-making. You can start to look at actually how are there trends between data sets, and then how can I use some of this data that I've got on my customers, on their lifetime value, on their propensity to buy, on the opportunity upsell, to start to unlock some of these new revenue streams that I talked about on the previous slide. So really, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today. We're on the stand right behind you. There's a lot of opportunity in this space, right, which is why we're taking the time and the investment into it, because it's going through a fundamental transformation. But I think there is so much that can be done, and we will see to be done with the data in terms of how you get to market. So I'll pause there. Happy to take any questions from anyone, and thank you again for your time. And it's always the first question, right? Yep, go on then, Tom. Thank you.
Matt, one of the things I mentioned before we started the presentation was the relationship between particularly franchise car retailers and their OEM partners. You talked about the benefits of customer data exchange. You know, is that something that I guess Salesforce can facilitate, and is it something that you feel is can genuinely benefit car retailers? You know, that sort of partnership needs to go both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, it's no secret. I think in the in the automotive industry, Salesforce started a lot working with the OEMs to be a lead generation and a lead distribution tool out to the retail network. But I think especially if you look at the move towards the agency model, yes, there is going to be there are going to be a number of sacrifices from a retail perspective, but actually you'll be working slightly closer with the OEMs, right, in that transactional process, and therefore that exchange of data backwards and forwards with the OEM, I think gives retailers an opportunity to drive better lifetime value from their customers. I expect the OEMs will start to be more open in the way that they share some of that life cycle and after-sales revenue data, and that you as a retailer can then start to use that to think not just about the initial vehicle sale, but the ongoing revenue that you can drive from that customer. So yes, I think the increase in data sharing between OEM and retailers will actually increase. It may result in OEM starting to mandate more systems, but I think it also provides an opportunity for you as a retailer to start to standardize your technology landscape and to set the expectation on the OEM about how that data is going to be exchanged and used. So yeah, a lot of investment I think is going into that space. Good. All right. Well, we're on the stand for the rest of the day. If you've got any questions, details are there, and thank you very much for your time.